You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning, Allison.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's coming off of Christmas break. I had some extra time off of work, which was really just wonderful to be able to slow down, not have as much going on every day. Spent a lot of time working on puzzles.
Nice.
So just kind of had some good downtime, which was really restful and kind of a good way to, come into the new year as much as I don't know. It's a new year, but like it's not, I don't have the whole new year, new me. Let's figure things out.
Guess what? I've known you for a lot of years now, and I feel like the old you is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
So don't even change it. Just keep bring the old Justin into this new year.
Good. I will do that.
Great.
Yeah. So other than that, not a lot going on.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's
what about
good.
you? How's life treating you lately?
Yeah, I mean, same that we had a lot of good downtime, which felt lovely. It's funny, like, I don't know if you've been experiencing this, but in this week, people are like, how was your holiday? You know, and I'm like, yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, I'm like, well, I guess Sean like sort of like choked at Christmas dinner and couldn't swallow. No. And then like on the 28th, he had a big procedure to like stretch his esophagus. But really, it was good. Which is just like a whole, that's a different topic we could have dig into. But like for us, that was a great week.
Right.
For other people, that would have been like the worst week of all time. Yeah. Right. But for us, we were like, it was overall pretty good. Yeah. So no, it was good. I feel I've had a lot. It's like we've definitely gone into like the gray, very gray here now.
Oh, yeah.
It's about to get cold. It hasn't gotten super cold, but it's just gray. And so I struggle with that. And so I have to I have to be really careful with that. And I should probably get out like my blue light and go to places like the garden store. It's a good excuse to go to the garden store or like the conservatory or whatever, just because, a couple days of it is cozy, but after a while, all that gray can really get to you.
It wears on you. Yeah,
it does. It does. So yeah. So doing all right.
Okay, good.
Excited to talk today about caregiving in the media.
Okay. Tell me more.
Because I'd love to. Because what I'm seeing, and I love this, sometimes people like guests or like listeners of the podcast will send me an article. Like, I saw this article about caregiving. Thought you'd like to read it. Love it. So, all the things I talk about in negative space are like the caregivers are unseen. We're like in the shadows. People don't notice us. So I always love it when we are seen.
Right.
And when there is an article or there's a show about caregiving or there's a character on a show or something or a movie who's caregiving. And so I feel like more of that is happening.
Right.
And what I'm also seeing is that sometimes it's missing the mark.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing sometimes it misses the mark. And I want to talk about that. Sometimes it's spot on. But sometimes I'm like, I'm watching a movie right now. I don't really want to think about caregiving.
Yeah.
So I just want to kind of dig in today together about like, where are we seeing caregiving in the media? When is that sort of a good thing? When are they doing it right? And how does that kind of impact us as caregivers?
Okay.
I want to say too, I don't know if I told you guys this on the podcast, but in November, I got to go to LA for this Care Fest through Caring Across Generations. Very fancy. And one of their things is really about storytelling around caregiving. And so there were a lot of people there. There were people from like the Hallmark Channel.
Oh, wow.
Like the president of the Hallmark Channel was there. And people from like ABC and all these different things about like, how can we better depict, but also just depict in general caregiving. So I think that it's a push and people are trying to do this, which feels good on one hand, but then also sometimes cannot. So here's where I'll start is that this week, somebody had sent me an article from AARP.
Okay.
And when I read it, I just got like mad, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
But in a familiar way, because here's what I'm seeing a lot in articles or news stories. It's like, there are a lot of caregivers out there. Yes, there are. Good. Thanks for seeing us. Yeah. Caregiving is really hard. Yes, it is. Thank you for putting that out there. So you know what caregivers need to do? They need to really take care of themselves. And then the other piece that almost always we should like do a content search and see this. Almost always it ends with, but it gives the caregiver a sense of purpose.
The
end. I'm like, what? So tell me this, like if you open up the news, saw that there was a caregiving article and might start with like, oh, good. And then read it and then saw something like that. Like how would you react, or what would you feel about, like, what would be the goods and the bads of reading an article like that or seeing that in print?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, if it was something that just appeared in the stuff, like it wasn't something that I'd sought out. It was just like in my normal stream of stuff. I'd be like, that's cool that this is being talked about enough that I'm just coming across it.
Right.
That's great. The part about all of, caregiving is hard, all of this, so caregivers need to take care of themselves. Like I would get a little frustrated, to put it I don't know, mildly with that. And what that instantly reminded me of is there's a comic of like a hand sticking out of the water that like someone's like drowning or something, and then like the other hand like gives it a high five.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that.
I have.
Yeah. And it's like, no, like we need the people around us to pull us out of the water, to help us out. Like, and so that's like really missing, I think, the key thing to make this a more sustainable thing societally.
Yes.
So that's frustrating to miss there. And then the need to like tie things up in a bow with like, well, it gives them a sense of purpose or whatever. Like, I think there's a real, like, as a society, we're not good with like tension.
Yeah.
Like leaving a story just kind of hanging there, like that we need resolution. We want resolution. Right. We don't want to be left like with that kind of like, what do we do? What do we do? Yeah. Discomfort. Yeah. I think of like, you're a music person, right?
Yeah.
Like it's uncomfortable ending a song on like an unresolved chord. Yes. Right. You just have to then like hit that next note and make it feel okay.
Right.
And I don't know what the solution to change that is. I think the more people are exposed to caregiving, the less it is an instantly like uncomfortable thing to think about, I think. So I think that just increased exposure might help. But I think there's probably a lot of things that reasons that people don't want to think about or have that discomfort with needing to have this story resolved, or needing to have it tied up in a bow. And I think a lot of that probably stems from people don't want to think about how this may be them someday,
right?
And the discomfort around that.
Totally. Yes, well said. And I think part of it is like, I think about, like, I know the truth, right? So I can read that article and be like, ugh. But what I think about then is all the other people reading that article, people who are not caregivers.
Yes.
And that now in their, it's called schema file.
Yeah.
In their schema file about caregiving in their brain is, oh, it's really hard. Therefore, they should take care of themselves. But you know what? In the end, it's okay because they have a sense of purpose.
Right.
Like that's what's in their schema file about caregiving. And so if they then see me and they're like, Allison, you're a caregiver. You know what?
Take care of yourself.
Take care. You make sure. Are you taking care of yourself?
Right.
But I'm so glad you have a sense of purpose. And I'm like, what? And in fact, someone actually told me this story that because there were a couple, I think it was New York Times, had a couple of really good articles of like about caregiving recently. Yeah. I think it was in November during Caregiver Month.
Okay.
And this happened in that this person realized that someone in their workplace had read the article and was essentially like quoting it back to them.
Okay.
But in a like oh, well, did you know, it's really important that you and that you and they were like, wait a minute, I think this person read their article. And in that situation, it was a good article. Yeah. But I think that just goes to show that like, what I worry about is that when the world, this is what they're seeing and learning about caregiving, that now that's all they know. And then they're going to, when they try to interact with us or try to understand us, they're going to miss the mark because the information they were just given was inaccurate.
Right.
And was aimed at, well, making them comfortable, but also just like was wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that feels really frustrating that And I think also like sort of the highs and lows of that. Like you said, if you're scrolling through your feed and you're like, whoa, caregiving in the news?
Yeah.
You're like, yes, people are going to see it. And then you're like, no, I don't want them to see this.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know with that piece, like, is there anything? Because I mean, if that story comes out and then we say if someone says, hey, I read this article in AARP about caregiving.
Yeah.
You know, and then we say, well, actually, it was kind of off and wrong, and it's way actually harder, and I don't have a sense of purpose about it, and like we just seem like we're like super pessimistic.
Yeah.
Because, well, this was AARP. I mean, come on. Like, clearly they're right and you're wrong, you know?
Right.
So is there I don't know, is there anything that we can do to combat these sort of faulty articles, these articles that are like painting an inaccurate picture?
Yeah.
In the world.
Yeah, that's tough. Kind of a similar situation or kind of feeling came to mind of when you have a chronic illness, or the person you're caring for has a chronic illness, and you have a good day, and you have to like qualify that so people don't see that you're having a good day. Like, that's not how this is. That's not like day to day. And that need to kind of preemptively put qualifications on what people are seeing.
Yeah.
And it feels like this is another situation where that kind of needs to happen. Yeah. And I don't know when and where that exactly happens. I think there is something to be said for something that prompts people to engage in a conversation with a caregiver about caregiving. Like, that's a step that, you know, a lot of times people might not be comfortable or know what an opening is there.
Right.
So an opening being, hey, I read this article about caregiving. Like, okay. But it's difficult from our end then to feel like we have to fact check their article as they're telling it to us, and maybe not fact check, because maybe, you know, I think that there are people who truly find a sense of purpose in caregiving, and like maybe this article was sincere in that sense, but it's important to note that that is not the case for everybody. Yeah. And so if you have the capacity, if this is a person who is close enough to you where this feels worthwhile, it could be the beginning of a like good conversation about what your life as a caregiver is really like. And well, it's not exactly like that. And, you know, yes, it's true that we have this hard situation we're going through and we need to be taken care of, but we can't solely do that ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. We need you and the people around us to help fill in those gaps and give us the time so that we can have downtime, so that we can pursue things outside of caregiving. Yeah. Yeah. And so I see it potentially as offering an opening into those conversations. Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And I think even if someone says, hey, I just read this article about caregiving, and even if you haven't read that particular article, you know, I think you as the caregiver could say something like, oh, I'm really glad I've too have seen caregiving in the news, and I'm really glad it's out there. What I've noticed is a pattern. Yeah. Is that a lot of these articles tend to say it's really hard, therefore caregivers need to take care of themselves. And it ties it up with a neat bow. Yeah. And the way I feel about when I see those things is XYZ, right? Yeah. Just because I'm guessing that's a pattern that I'm seeing in a lot of these articles. And so even if you haven't read that article, you can say, here's something that I've seen. Yeah. That feels fresh, as opposed to being like, oh yeah, well, it is hard. Yeah. Right? Because I think you're right that there can be a sense of purpose for people. And even if they do, some people don't feel that, some people do. Even if they do, that's not the full picture. Right. It's not just like, well, but everything's okay because I feel a sense of purpose. Right. Like, it's like, that's a sliver of the pie. And so the article makes it feel like that's it. That's the whole pie. Yeah. And so I think you're right that like to use that if someone says that, to use it as an opening and then to say, here's kind of what I've seen. And what I've experienced. And, you know, I'd say this quote all the time. If I got a tattoo, this is what my tattoo should say, is the quote around shouting self-care at people who need community care is how we fail them. Yeah. And so that's essentially what's happening, right? This is so hard. Therefore, take care of yourself. Right. And so instead it's like, no, we need you to take care of us. Yeah. 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 So I love that though, but taking that advantage of that opening to have that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good that we're seeing articles about caregiving in the news, and there's some pluses there. There's some minuses like we've talked about. Have you seen, or where are you seeing articles that are doing it well? Or are there places that are doing it well, such that there might be, someone says, hey, I read this article about caregiving. Like, oh, I have this other article too. Could I share this with you? And maybe it gives a more realistic picture. Like, is that happening? Do you see that anywhere?
Good question. Yeah. I think that the two that were in the New York Times were both very good.
Okay.
And again, those were in November. And one was just sort of painting the whole picture. And then the other one was in about more like the finances and how expensive it is and how so many people are going into debt, just trying to pay for the costs. And so those two seemed very spot on.
Yeah.
But I love that. The idea, instead of just being like, I'm going to take your AARP article and shut you down. It's like, hey, thanks for sharing that one. I read another one.
Yeah.
And I'd really love to share that one with you. And it means a lot to me that you care enough about my caregiving role that you're bringing this up, or that you're willing to read an article. Thank you. Yeah. I think the other big place is media. Like, right, I talked about like the Hallmark Channel and ABC and all of those things. And so in movies and shows, they're trying to be more intentional and caring across generations. Like, this is one of their goals, is to be more intentional about representing caregiving at all, but then also doing it not just in, typically they said, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but typically it's just, if caregiving is shown, it's more of like a white middle-class mom caring for kids. Like, is the one way we see caregiving.
Yeah.
And so all the other ways. And so I'm seeing it more and more and more. And sometimes I feel like they're doing it well and sometimes they're not. But like I watch, have you seen Queen Charlotte?
I have not.
You should just stop recording right now and go watch it.
Okay.
Maybe not. Finish the episode, then go watch it. So it's part of the Bridgerton series.
Okay.
And it's a little like spin-off thing. It is so wonderful. So wonderful. And there's a huge spousal caregiving storyline.
Okay.
That I did not know going into it.
Right.
And it's done so powerfully and so beautifully. And I think an interesting thing is that I was like drawn to it. In fact, I watched the whole series twice, which I never do.
Wow.
And I think part of why I was drawn to it is because it was spousal caregiving, but it was different than what my, the thing that's going on. I won't spoil anything, but the thing that's going on is very different from what my caregiving looks like. But there were threads that are similar.
Okay.
So it was, plus it's, like England in like whatever year, a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
So it's very different from my life.
Yeah, right.
I do not wear the corsets and all of the things, right? So, but like so it was similar enough that I loved watching it, but it was also different enough that it didn't feel triggery.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's where I'm struggling sometimes. So like the other day during break, I was like, I just want to like sort of be half asleep and like have a movie on in the background kind of thing. And I found this movie on Netflix called Eating Cakes in Bars.
Okay.
And it looks cute and like whatever. And then like a couple bit into the movie, it turned into like this big cancer movie. And the cool thing is it was like the caregiver was like a friend. So it was like, that was a kind of a cool depiction. But I actually had to stop it because I was like, this is not going well. Like, and the treatment wasn't working and and then they needed to, and they were in the ER. And I was like, nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Same thing happened. We tried to watch, I think it's called Tiny Beautiful Things.
Okay.
By Cheryl Strayed. And we tried to watch that last year. And it was about her taking care of her mom who was dying of cancer. Yeah. And this was right after Sean's mom had passed away. And we got a couple episodes in and we're like, nope.
Yeah.
So I want to say that too, that sometimes it's like the same, right? We're like caregiving and the thing. And then we're like, ooh. Sometimes maybe because they don't represent it well, but sometimes because it's like too close.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Have you ever had that experience where you've either in a show or a movie like seen caregiving or seen illness, and either it's been a positive experience for you or not so much?
Right. I think I'm noticing it more lately, and I don't know if that's because, I don't know, I do a podcast about caregiving, and so I'm more like my eyes are open more. Yeah. To looking out for that kind of thing. But I even as like not the main plot, but like maybe a character as a like side story. They're taking care of their mom or something.
Yeah.
And that kind of weaves in and out of the main story a little bit. Like that's a thing, seeing something like that. For the most part, I feel like, oh, I'm glad that they're showing this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I've had quite the same, like, I have to turn this off. This is too close to life.
Sure.
And I don't know if that's because ME isn't something that's like typically how this is being told. Like often if caregiving is shown in the media, maybe it's cancer, maybe it's an aging parent. Like those are kind of probably the two main ways it shows up.
Right.
But also I think that for me, sometimes watching something is a good way to like open up my emotions and like cry. So I could see myself personally, like if something were kind of close to home, like that being an opportunity to like really go through feeling things about it, as kind of a tool for that. So that's kind of what comes to mind for me with there. I think it's important to remember that just because caregiving is depicted doesn't mean you have to watch, doesn't mean you have to engage with it. You can be like, I'm glad that this is being shown, not for me.
Yep.
Because truly, we want caregiving to be represented and more accurately represented, not so we can watch those stories necessarily.
Right.
I mean, I think there's something to seeing it and being like feeling seen, feeling validated, feeling good that this experience is being shown to more people, that the awareness is growing. But ultimately, I think we want those things there so that the people who are not caregivers or not caregivers yet are exposed to what this life is like, that they can see the people in their lives then that are caregivers, that they can have a better sense of what their life might be like, of how they can support them better. And to help caregiving be seen to those people, I think, is the real benefit to having it show up in TV and movies, etc.
Yeah. Good point. Really good point. Because I think that especially, and because this is my life and my work and my everything, that I feel like I should probably watch all those things. Same with books. Yeah. Right? We can talk about books in a minute, but like, I'm like, I should probably be up on that. And then sometimes I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I'm already living it. So like the other day when that movie was on, I was like, I just wanted an escape.
Right.
Like I wanted like a 2-hour, like just fluffy escape. I don't want to watch someone getting like a PET scan. Come on. Right.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of an escape for me. So I think that's I'm glad you said that it like, we don't have to watch it. It's so that other people can see that. And then maybe in their mind, they'll say like, oh, I wonder if this is like what Allison's life is like. And maybe I better understand what's going on with her. I mean, there is a part of me then that wants to watch everything to like vet it.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. That is, then you have to kind of have this sense of, oh, they're seeing this stuff, but is it like that art, like the article you were talking about? Is it kind of missing the mark and giving them the wrong impressions? Yeah, that's a risk.
But I wonder if instead of that, if someone says, hey, watch this show the other day and I had caregiving in it, it made me think of you. And instead of me running off to like watch it to see like how I could to say like, well, tell me what did you see? Like, what were you taking? So that I can then be like, oh, well, that part rings true with me. This part maybe not so much. What would you, like you said, part of it for you is that like you're that ME is not depicted.
Yeah, right.
Which is also an issue, right? That cancer is like everywhere, right? But there's so many other medical things happening that are not depicted. And so if there was either a documentary, and maybe the answers would be different, but like a documentary about it or a TV show where they were going to depict that, would you want to watch it? Or would you be like, no, thank you?
That's a great question. There's not an immediate one or the other that like instantly jumps to mind. I think I would feel like I should watch it. I definitely think that would be there. I think that it might be something where I try to learn a little bit more about it and then make the decision. But I think it's probably more likely that I would end up watching it than not.
You would.
I would, just because it's not something that I maybe would have seen at all before. Or I mean, there's not that there's not documentaries about ME, but it's like there's not a lot. And to see that feels, I don't know, it feels like there's something important about that. Partially because unfortunately it probably wouldn't, I don't know, those kind of documentaries, those kind of things don't get like broad exposure.
Sure.
And so part of it feels important to see the story that's being told, so that because it's important that people see it. And so like, that the masses aren't going to see it. So, but I can see it, and I can see what this person is going through, and I can kind of take that on. Now, if that's, whether or not that's just the caregiverness in me that feels like I want to always help, I don't know, but I think I would definitely be glad that it is a piece of media that exists.
Yeah.
Whether or not in the end I decided to view it.
Sure. Do you think, and maybe you don't know this answer, but do you think that Sarah would want to watch it?
I get the sense that Sarah would probably not want to watch it, for the sense that it would hit too close to home.
Sure.
And I think that for her, and maybe and other people who are actually sick, like, there is sometimes you don't want to be reminded of how much this thing has affected your life. Maybe what's being depicted is more severe than what you have, and there's a fear that that's the future and you don't want to engage with that. Or maybe you're trying to expand and not feel like you are so defined by your diagnosis. And so you don't want to overly expose yourself to it. And that's fine. That piece of media is not being created necessarily for the person for people with that same illness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and whereas I would hope that something would really accurately depict what caregiving looks like and how hard it is for me and for other caregivers and for people who are learning about caregiving, I could see that might be hard for Sean to watch.
Yeah.
Because it's just another thing of like, oh man, I mean, and he knows that it's hard for me, right? But for him to watch that and him to watch me being like, yeah, look how hard that is. Yay. He might be like, oh, I'm sorry. This is really hard on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's an interesting piece of it, right? Especially if he and I would watch things together, that we would be bringing, sort of taking it in differently. And I know that we had that experience when we were watching the Queen Charlotte, is that we could both see ourselves in those characters. And it was beautiful, but also like, whew, a lot, Yeah. Somebody just yesterday asked me about, there's this new documentary called American Symphony, and it's John Baptiste, who I love. Do you know John Baptiste? He's a musician.
Okay.
He used to be on the Colbert, or Stephen Colbert's whatever show, late night show. And now he's just like a breakout artist and is amazing and all the stuff. And so it's about him and his music, which I would love to watch, but also his wife has had 2 bone marrow transplants.
Ooh.
And she's written a book between 2 something worlds, maybe, that I've gotten and like tried to read, and then like been like, nope, too much. And so someone just yesterday was like, have you watched this? It's so good. And I was like, nope. And I'm bummed because I just want to watch the music half of it.
Right.
But I know that half of it's about his music and half of it's about her being in the hospital having a bone marrow transplant. And I'm like, yeah, I lived that.
Right.
And I don't really know that I need to like relive it as my entertainment.
Yeah. Right.
And so same I find a lot with books. There's a lot of memoirs out there from caregivers, and I just can't really, like, I have a hard time kind of getting into those because I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yep.
And it doesn't, in those spaces, that doesn't feel comforting. Like maybe if it was an article or something, but like a whole, especially because I see like books and TV and movies as sort of like, like entertainment and like,
turn your brain off or escape, or
so to like get in bed at night and like read someone's story of their bone marrow transplant feels terrible. Right. Which, I'm sure I'm missing out on some good books, but again, like you said, like it's probably better for someone else who hasn't gone through that to read that book and to learn, whereas maybe I don't need that,
right?
And I'm glad that if I need to talk to someone else about a bone marrow transplant, there are other people out there, but like that's not, the need that I have,
right,
in that way. And for me, it feels just more triggering of like, I don't need to, I don't need to relive this in my entertainment time,
Right. Yeah. The one thing that kind of came to mind as you were talking through that is going back to you asking me if I would watch that documentary.
Yeah.
I think that the more I think about it, the more I think I would watch it, because I would want to know if it is a good thing to send to people in my life to show what our life is like.
Sure.
Or, and so, but again, that's making it I'm not watching this for entertainment. Like it's almost work.
Yeah.
It's a task.
Totally.
And so we don't often have time for that. And it's a task that could potentially be really difficult and emotional and all of that to watch. And so I'm not saying that you should always do that as a caregiver. Like,
sure.
But I feel that there would be a sense, and maybe it's because Emmy isn't depicted as much at all.
Yeah.
And there's so little that I feel like we would be able to draw from to send, here's a great example of what our life is like, whereas something like cancer, where people are more exposed to it and have a better sense of it, maybe that's not as necessary.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I totally get that. And I think that sometimes with these books that I'm like, well, maybe if I read it in the middle of the day, because then it'll feel like it's work as opposed to like entertainment in my cozy bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes me think about, did you watch This Is Us?
No, I did not.
Okay. Also a wonderful, 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 wonderful show. Lots of seasons though. But in the very final season, they depicted caregiving beautifully. And actually, I think that they had Caring Across Generations come and like consult with them to help them. Yeah. But so raw that it almost felt like, to me, I don't know how to say this, that it almost felt like, wait a minute, people are going to see that, like people are going to see how real this really is. Like, whoa. Oh, like it almost felt super vulnerable.
Right.
Like our secrets, like our dirty underwear or whatever was like being put out on TV of like how hard this really is.
Yeah.
Which is something I'm always like pushing for. But it was like when I saw it, I was like, oh, wait, people are really going to see this and be like, oh, it looks like this. Oh, you know what I mean? And so I was grateful. And again, like it's a storyline that is spousal, but is not cancer related. So I felt like it was like close enough, but distant enough that I could watch it. So I was glad that it was there, but it almost was like, wait a minute. Like I was almost like looking around the room that was empty, but to be like, wait, are you all seeing this? Like people are going to watch this and be like, oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm glad that it happened, but it's just, it feels like this really like, tight rope of your, like when you said, I might want to watch it because it might make me cry, like might release some things that I don't let myself release in day-to-day life because I'm seeing it on the screen.
Yeah.
Like it could be that. It could be like, ooh, this feels too vulnerable. It could be like this, you know what I mean? Like so many things. And so I think one thing is like to give ourselves permission to be like, pause. Yeah. Put the book down, turn the show off. Like you don't need to finish this episode right now or maybe ever.
Yeah. Right.
And maybe this week that's great. And maybe, like maybe this year we could watch tiny, beautiful things. But last year we could not, And so I think just to know that like we don't have to consume all of it and that we get to decide what we consume and how we consume it. And, Yeah. Absolutely. I try to have like people in my life where I say like, okay, like there's this show From Scratch.
Okay.
That a lot of people liked. And so I have this friend who loved it. And I was like, okay, but is it too cancery? Like how cancery is it? So I try to have other people or my friend who reads 1 billion books a year, I'll be like, all right, I'm thinking about this book. Are there triggers? And then she'll be like, you should not read that book. I'm like, okay, good to know. Thank you. Yeah. So if you have people in your life who get you enough, who can sort of screen things on your behalf, Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of shows that I feel like did it really well that I just want to list. So I think the Queen Charlotte for sure. This Is Us for sure.
Okay.
The Bear. You and I both loved The Bear.
Yeah. Right? I was thinking about that prior to our recording a little bit.
Yeah. So that was just like a blip, right? It wasn't like a huge storyline, but it was very, that was like a son caring for his mother. And I think that was really like, so again, it wasn't just like, our whole thing is about caregiving, but it was just part of the storyline. And I think it was really, I think that was really well done. Or what's your opinion on how they did that?
I liked that it's something that showed up as a side story. Just normalizing the fact that is something that people deal with in their lives.
Yep.
And they have other stuff going on. The only thing about that specific example that kind of felt a little bit off is the character goes and travels away for an fairly extended period of time to work on something.
Yep.
And there's a little bit of scene of like talking to like a handoff to like some
like a
care workers,
home care nurse. Yeah.
On like, okay, here's what to do. But it felt very like that's maybe a stretch that would be a realistic opportunity that he would be able to take.
Totally.
But beyond that, I think it was done pretty well. Yeah.
But I think they did show him like he was like trying to call and he was, you know what I mean? There were some of those pieces you could tell he was definitely torn. Like, should I go? Should I take this opportunity? Should I not? But no, I really like that. Another one that I watched that I feel like not that many people got into, but was Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you watch that?
I did. You suggested it and I watched that. Yeah.
Well, look at that. So, in that one, that's more of a lighthearted because a lot of these other ones are kind of serious shows. And so for those who haven't watched it, it's like I can't remember how it happened. She got struck by lightning or I don't know, something happened and she could like hear things in musicals essentially, which is why I was probably the only person who watched it because I love musicals. But a huge part of that storyline was that her father had, I don't think it was ALS, but it was like a form of ALS. And so it really showed her mom caring for her dad. It showed her and her brother and how they were impacted. And so that ended up being a big part of the storyline. And I think it seemed pretty accurate. I mean, it seemed, and so I was really glad that was shown as well.
Yeah.
There's another one just on a sort of a side note that I think is either just came out or is coming out soon. That's a movie about grief. And it's with the guy from Schitt's Creek, Dan Levy, I think is his name,
Yeah.
And again, I was like, ooh, this looks really good. I don't know. So I think that's the thing too. Like we have to think about like, what do we need? What are we up for? What do we want? What's helpful and all of that. And again, and maybe that's the kind of thing that people might watch it and then better understand our grief, but that doesn't mean we have to watch it.
Right.
So yeah. What do we, well, anything before we go to supporters? Anything else you want to cover?
No, nothing else comes to mind at the moment. Okay. I think we've done a good job here.
Well, good for us.
Good for us. High five.
High five. Supporters.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So for supporters, I think first and foremost, read the articles, but understand that is one story. Understand that might not be the full picture. Understand that if it says that, but if the conclusion is caregivers just need to take care of themselves, question that. Like if you're a supporter and you're listening to us, you probably know that's not the full story, that's not the solution, that the people around need to step up. And so know that. And if you're having a conversation with others about caregiving, like be vocal that, hey, this article didn't really depict that right, or we really need to be doing this. So kind of take that and then advocate further with that. I think that you've given some good examples of what caregiving looks like. Maybe watch some of those and see what it looks like, see how it shows up. And then I think if you watch something, if you read something that you think is good and you want to talk to the person you're supporting about it, like I think that's good because it shows that you're paying attention. It shows that you care. It shows that you want to know what their life is like. But understand that their experience might be different. And so hold the things that you took away lightly, if that makes sense. Like don't feel like, well, I saw this is what it is. And like, not that you're going to argue with them, but to take, because they're the person you're supporting, that's the experience that you're in. You're in that set of circles. Maybe take their experience with a little bit more weight than what you saw in this television show. A lot. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. But I think it would be appreciated to know as a caregiver that people are paying attention to when it shows up out in the world.
Yep.
And are taking the time to read a book, read an article, and try to educate themselves more.
Yeah. 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 I feel a little torn between, like, if somebody said to me, hey, I saw this article about caregiving and I read it and I was thinking of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, like, how accurate do you feel like that was?
Yeah.
Like, I feel torn because part of me wants them to ask me that so that I can be like, no. Mm-hmm. But also that gives me a job.
That's
right.
Very fair.
And so I don't know. I don't know. You kind of play it by ear based on the situation. But even if someone said to me, hey, I was watching, I'm trying to think. I watched the John Baptiste American Symphony, and I had a bone marrow transplant in it, and it really made me think about you and Sean and all that you went through. And I just wanted to say that, right? Mm-hmm. Or I got the AARP magazine, and there was an article about caregiving, and I read it thinking of you,
right?
So I think even those pieces, because like being thought of, and knowing that people are thinking of us, and realizing we're a caregiver, and connecting those dots can feel great, right? And so then, I think then we can leave it open to, you don't want to give the caregiver homework of like, well, have you seen the John Baptiste thing? Was it accurate? What did you think? And then I feel like, oh, I'm going to go watch this movie, right?
Yeah.
But just to say, like, I know that might not be fully your experience. However, it was good to get a peek into what that might have been like for you and Sean and blah, blah, blah. So, I think just being thought of is huge. And I think even maybe like I would appreciate like some trigger warnings. Like if someone says, hey, I was just reading this book. And at first I thought you might like it, but then I thought, oh, that might be too much. So just wanted to give you a heads up that it might be too close to home, So, but I think also when you're reading something, especially like an article, to think through, we should all be thinking about this, but like whose comfort is this trying to protect?
Yeah.
And often it's the reader, not the caregiver.
Right.
And so, is this accurate? Like, how would the caregiver have told this story versus the journalist who's trying to protect the comfort of the reader,
Yeah. I mean, I can almost see, though, as the caregiver being interviewed, like feeling pressure to wrap your story up in a bow, to feel pressure to be looking out for the comfort of the interviewer.
Right.
Like there's levels.
Yes.
And that nothing, not speaking ill of any caregiver who is interviewed for these articles, but I could see that pressure being there and impacting what and how much you're sharing.
Right. And how you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right. That you might feel like, oh, I've said, oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. But also it's good.
Yeah.
And I can also see the journalist writing the article and being like, ooh, this is going to be a real downer. And then they say, but it was good. And they're like, ta-da, there's my ending, So I think just like you talked about earlier about ending things on the tension, right?
Yeah.
And we just need to feel like it's okay. It's okay to say, this is hard.
Yeah.
Period. Or it could be, it'd be great. Caregiving is really hard.
Yeah.
Here's how you, supporter, can help. Here's how you can help systemically. Here's how you can help across the backyard fence. Here's how you can help because your friends, 53 million of your friends, are struggling. So like that, let that be the end.
Right.
As opposed to just like, ta-da, but really they're fine. Turn the page, read the next article, So yeah. So good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do hope that like there'll be more intentional ways that caregiving will show up. And I think it's interesting that it hits us all in lots of different ways. And so, we'll just keep hoping that it shows up and hope that as it does, it gets more and more accurate.
Right. Exactly.
So that we don't have to add to our lists, like fight the inaccuracy of caregiving portrayed in the media.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Okay. Good to talk to you, friend.
This has been great.
Yeah. Listeners, I'm excited to talk to you at the sport group. So watch for that. If you're interested, you can bring any shows or videos or books that you feel like have portrayed it well or have not, and share that with us. So it'll be good to have that conversation. So watch for that date coming up too. So, all right. Happy New Year, friend. Talk to you later.
You too. Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.